Hello and welcome to the Redefining High Performance Podcast. My name is Ty Bennett. I'm going to be your host. If you're finding this podcast for the very first time, I welcome you. If you've been with me before, thank you for staying with me. And we are back with a new season, with a new name, with a new format for this podcast. So for those who don't know, this podcast was formerly known as the Relevant Leadership Podcast. I hosted that podcast for years and got to a point where I needed to take a break, just mostly for all the things on my plate. Something had to give, and I had to prioritize some of those things. And I've missed this format. I've missed being able to share some of these ideas and have these conversations. But we're going to come with a new format and a new name for a couple of reasons. One, we just conducted a national research study on high performance, and I want to dive in deep on that and together redefine what high performance looks like in each of our lives, in each of our organizations, as leaders, in sales, in whatever capacity that is for you. And so we're going to dive into that research. Number two is I would often get feedback from people who would find this podcast primarily because they saw me speak on stage. I'm a keynote speaker. I speak at events all over the world on a regular basis. And maybe you saw me at your corporate event or at an association event, and you came to the podcast to want to continue that type of conversation. And most often, the podcasts that I was doing before were interviews with other people. And I love that. I love the insights that they give. But because of the feedback, what we're going to do in this season of this podcast is I'm going to come to you weekly with short, quick, practical episodes that give you one idea with key takeaways that you can use in your life. And so most of these episodes are going to be about 10 minutes. I'm going to grab one piece of the research and flush it out. And we're going to have a conversation, share some stories and some insights, and specifically, here's some strategies you can use. And hopefully this will serve you and add value to your life. It'll be quick hitting. It'll be easy to listen to. Hopefully you'll love it. You'll share it with other people. You'll subscribe, you'll like, you'll rate, review, all of those things. And we're going to do that on a regular basis. Every once in a while, if there's somebody that I want to interview that I think can bring an incredible story, insights, perspective, expertise, then we're going to add some bonus episodes in here with a little bit longer format, normal podcast that you're used to. So let me tell you about the study that we did, that we published, called Redefining High Performance. I've done research over my career. My team has done research as I've written different books. But this was the deepest research that we've ever done. And to do this, we partnered with the Center for Generational Kinetics. Shout out to Jason Dorsey and his team of PhD researchers. They were incredible to work with. And what we did is we worked with them to design and execute a national research study looking at what high performance looks like in today's world. I've always been fascinated with high performance. I've always wanted to raise my level, my game, to compete at the highest levels, to perform at the highest levels. And the reality is, I think you do too. There's at least a part of you that does, because you're here listening to this podcast. And there's that inside of you, that ambition, that curiosity, that passion, that drive. And I love that. You are my people. I've loved studying high performance because the reality is high performance isn't common, right, in any industry. But when you study high performers, there are commonalities that they share and that we can observe and then adopt to raise our level of performance. And so let me tell you what we did for this study. This was not just a survey on LinkedIn. This wasn't a couple of questions. This was working with a group of PhDs and then waiting to the US Census, looking at a statistically accurate account for working America. So what we did is we surveyed nearly 1,000 people, taking into account age from 18 to 65, working America, right? Ethnicity, gender, region, all of the factors, so that we came away with a statistical probability of about 3%, meaning plus or minus 3%. That means that the answers that we received, this data that I'm going to share with you, if you were to go and survey 10,000 or 100,000 Americans, within 3%, you're going to get the same conclusions. And so why did I want to do it now? Because I think that we as a country, as a people, I think that we are redefining high performance. in our world today. I mean, think about how much has changed, right? AI is changing the complexity, the operation of how we do things, how we perform, how we create. I think over the last couple of years, we have had a huge shift in our mindset and our mode of operation, right? Remote work and virtual didn't exist a couple of years ago, or at least it wasn't used prevalently. And so our modes of working and interacting have changed dramatically. Our thought processes towards mental health and burnout and some of these things have shifted as we're hopefully getting a little bit more holistic in our approach. And so this isn't just about hustle culture. This is about how do we create and sustain a level of performance that allows us to win, that allows us to succeed, that allows us to be relevant. That's what this study was all about. We found some really interesting things. In fact, one statistic that I just think about often is we found that over 50% of Americans would actually take less pay to go work at an organization that would help them raise their level of performance, that would increase their skill set, their mindset, their ability. Think about that from an organizational standpoint. That means that this is important to people. This is a driver, even more important than pay for more than half of Americans. And so if you're a leader of an organization, you need to be thinking about high performance. You need to be thinking about, how do I raise the level of performance of my people? How do I train them? How do I equip them? How do I make them better? How do I allow them to win? Those are the conversations that I'm having with organizations all over the world. And it's fascinating to bring some of this research into it. We dove deep in lots of different areas in the research, and over these next couple of episodes, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the drivers of high performance. We're going to flesh out each of those. We're going to talk about barriers, right? What holds us back? What is stopping us from actually reaching our full potential? What are those things that really keep us from achieving? We're going to talk about high performance in leadership. We're going to talk about high performance in organizations, all of the things. If you haven't ever read it, we published a white paper. You can find that on my website at tybennett.com. Just go search under research. You can find the white paper there. You can download it for free and dive into some of the insights of that. But for today's episode, I want to share with you one really interesting thing that came out of the research. And that is, there was one specific skill set above all others that people in America believe you need to be successful in today's world. Now, I want you to think about today's world. Today's world is changing quickly. Today's world is, things that we are talking about today in a year from now, in many cases, will be obsolete. That's how quickly it's changing. We need to understand what separates people in today's world. Not what used to work, but what works now and what's going to allow us to continue to be relevant. I don't know about you, but one of the biggest fears I think anybody in business should have is being irrelevant. It's not being able to keep pace, to be able to continue to add value. And so this skill set becomes crucial. Now, when I speak to audiences, what I do to introduce this idea is I have a debate with them. And if you're a basketball fan, this is a debate you're probably familiar with. The debate is this: who is the greatest basketball player of all time? Now, when I asked that question, I bet a bunch of names came into your mind. At least one came into your mind. And I'll tell you, because I've had this conversation with a lot of people, with a lot of audiences, I'll tell you the main names that come to mind. Michael Jordan is probably the first name. In most people's estimation, Michael Jordan is the GOAT. He's the greatest of all time. 6 championships, MVPs, scoring titles, defensive prowess. He was incredible. So he might be the standard, but for sake of conversation, I want you to think of who else comes to mind. I'll tell you other names that come to mind often. LeBron James. LeBron James, his longevity in basketball, I don't know if it's ever going to be matched. He is over 40 years old and was all NBA this last year. He's had titles on 3 different teams. He's been incredible as an all-star and an MVP caliber player. He has scored more points than anyone in NBA history. He's definitely on the list. Other names that come up often, Kobe Bryant, that Mamba mentality. Kobe was a killer. He's fantastic, definitely on the list. If you go way back, there's some centers like Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell that get thrown on the list often. Larry Bird is a name that comes up, probably the only white guy that deserves to be on the list. But, I've had this conversation with a lot of people, and the name that gets left off most often is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Now, let me make a case for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and it's going to lead us to the point that we're talking about. Kareem was born as Lew Alcindor. That was his given name. He eventually changed his name. So I'm just going to refer to him as Kareem because that's the name that he chose to go by. But Kareem, through high school, was dominant. He went to Power Memorial High School in New York City, and his team went 72-0. They never lost a game. He was recruited by every major college. He chose to go to UCLA, which at the time was the two-time defending national champions. So he went over to California, but when he got on campus, at that time, freshmen couldn't play on the varsity team, and so he had to wait a year and train and get ready for his opportunity. But the freshman team at UCLA scrimmaged the varsity team, the two-time defending national champions, and the freshman team killed them. Kareem had 31 points and 21 rebounds in that game. And the UCLA newspaper wrote an article where they said, our team may be the best in this country, but it's only the second best on this campus. So Kareem trained and got ready. And the beginning of his sophomore season, as his very first game, he scored 56 points. It's still a UCLA record. Through his sophomore season, he was completely dominant. He led the NCAA in scoring. He led the NCAA in field goal percentage. He was National Player of the Year, and they won a national championship. He was killing it. Everything was working out. And at the end of his sophomore season, the NCAA made a rule change where they outlawed dunking from the game of basketball. They literally changed the rules and said you can no longer dunk the basketball. And over time, that's come to be known as the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar rule or the Lew Alcindor rule, because it was actually a racist move by the NCAA to stop his dominance. Now, I want you to put yourself in Kareem's shoes, and maybe you've had this kind of moment before. Maybe you've had a point in your life where the rug has been pulled out from underneath you. I think we all face those. I now think of them as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar moments where basically we have to adapt or we have to die, right? I mean, those are the only two options. And so it would have been natural for Kareem to quit, to take his ball and go home and say, this is racist, this isn't fair. But instead, Kareem went back into the gym and he started to adapt his game, figure out other ways to score. And he developed or continued to develop a shot that eventually became his signature shot. It was called the sky hook. The sky hook, I mean, imagine this. Kareem is 7'2" with a 7'4" wingspan. He puts his defender on one side of his body and he releases the shot at the very highest point with the other hand. It's indefensible. Nobody could stop the shot. So he came back his junior season. He could no longer dunk the basketball, but guess what he did? He led the NCAA in scoring, field goal percentage. He was National Player of the Year, and they won a national championship. His senior year, he did the same thing. Scoring, field goal percentage, National Player of the Year, they won a national championship. He was dominant through college. He was the #1 pick in the NBA draft by the Milwaukee Bucks. He won a championship there. And then for some unexplained reason, they traded him to the Lakers. I have no idea why that keeps happening, but Kareem at the Lakers went on to win 5 more championships. In 20 seasons in the NBA, Kareem was an All-Star 19 times. He was the MVP 6 times, which is the most ever in NBA history. And he finished his career scoring the most points in NBA history, and that record held for the next 35 years until LeBron James broke that record. I think Kareem deserves to be in the conversation of the GOAT. But his story is not just a story of basketball greatness. I believe his story is a story of adaptability. That's the key. Charles Darwin said this. He said, the most important factor in your survival is neither intelligence nor strength, but adaptability. Our research showed that 79% of Americans believe that adaptability is the most crucial skill for you to be successful in today's world. In today's world that is constantly changing, that is constantly evolving, that new technology, new ways, new approaches, all of that is changing so quickly. And so here's the key to adaptability. I believe that you have to keep learning and keep growing. In fact, I believe this: if you want to lead in today's world, your rate of learning has to keep pace with the rate of change. I'll say that again. Your rate of learning has to keep pace with your rate of change. So what are you doing to learn on a regular basis? Now, if you're listening to this podcast, you're already doing part of it, right? Diving into podcast listening, whether you're listening while you're on a walk, driving in your car, whatever it is, I'm grateful you are, and I'm proud that that is part of your practice. I hope that you're reading books. I hope that you are seeking feedback. I hope that you're thinking about who can I reach out to in the next little bit and go take them to lunch and learn from them. Ask them about their experience, gain wisdom from them, let them mentor me. Like all of those things. Let me give you an idea, a strategy, a new approach that's going to help facilitate this type of mentality, this ongoing learning, and therefore your ability to adapt and grow and stay relevant in today's world. Most of us have to-do lists. We're go-getters, right? We have to-do lists of what you want to do today, this week, this month, this year, and you write out that to-do list and it feels fantastic. You get that little dopamine hit when you scratch something off of your list. I think that that's fantastic. You need to keep that. But I'm going to ask you to start another list. On top of the to-do list, what I want you to start is a to-learn list. A to-learn list is a list where you add things that you want to learn, areas where you want to improve, skills that you want to develop, things that pique your curiosity, right? If something piques your curiosity, what do you do with that? Hopefully you add it onto your to-learn list and you could go dive in, go on ChatGPT and say, let's deep dive on this topic. Let's flush this out. Go on Amazon and type in that title or that topic and find some books that you can dive into. Ask people about it, right? I hope that you start a to-learn list and this becomes an ongoing document. Put it on your phone, put it in a notebook, whatever you want to do, but continue to add to it, because if you'll have a to-learn list that you keep adding to, then guess what? You're going to stay curious. You're going to stay hungry. You're going to keep learning, and therefore you're going to keep adapting to the world that we live in today so that you can stay relevant and continue to perform at a high level. Adaptability is the most crucial skill for success in today's world, according to the research. That plays out. I think most people realize that's the case. And the key to adaptability is to continue to learn. So start your to-learn list. Continue to focus on keeping pace with the rate of change, with your rate of learning. That's the takeaway for today. I appreciate you listening. I'm excited to be back with this format. If you haven't done so, subscribe to this podcast. Please give us some ratings and reviews. 5 stars are always appreciated. I appreciate that. Share this with a friend. But I will be back with you next week with another insight from our research. We're going to dive deep into it. Thank you again. This is Ty Bennett. I'll talk to you soon.